Tonight is Monday, August 28th, 2017. This is the regular city council meeting for the city of St. Peter. It is 7 o'clock p.m. We'll call the meeting to order, and would all please join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Everyone should have a copy of the agenda in front of them, or is there any changes to the agenda? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor of the agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Agenda is approved. Next up, we have the minutes from our last meeting, which appear on pages 4 through 7. That meeting was on August 14th. Are there any changes or corrections to those minutes? If not, is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of the minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. First up tonight, we have a public hearing. The public hearing has to do with a tax increment financing district. And what we will do, you want me to go over just the basic procedures, Paula?
Sure.
Basic procedures with the, thank you. With the public hearing, begins with the staff presentation. In this case, it would be Mr. Sweeney. And then after that, we would have an applicant's presentation if there is anybody here. It doesn't look like it right offhand. And then after that, we have public comment for or against for the proposal. We try to limit speakers to 5 minutes, except in Mr. Sweeney's case, we'll alter that a little bit. And then we encourage the council not to ask questions because not of Mr. Sweeney, or Mr. Sweeney, but of other people that are making comments, just because we don't want to discourage people from being held their feet to the fire on situations like this. We want them to feel welcome. With that, we will open the public hearing at 7:05 p.m. And with that, Mr. Sweeney.
Greetings, Mayor and members of the council. I hope that by limiting my comments, you meant shortening them from the 5-minute duration. But no, the purpose of the public hearing is to receive comment with regard to the proposed creation of Tax Increment Financing District 1-22. It encompasses the Mary's Flowers property and an adjoining residential property. We're not proposing any action this evening. We're simply holding the public hearing requirement and taking comments with regard to the proposed action and answering questions. But ultimately, Growth Holdings a private developer has purchased the property and is proposing to demolish it and construct a new commercial facility, probably a multi-tenant commercial facility. And they've requested some assistance with costs associated with the redevelopment of the site, including demolition and utility disconnections and reconnections. Nothing has been negotiated at this time with regard to assistance to be provided. We're working our way through the process, and that again is why no action is intended for this evening, because we weren't far enough along with the project in order to make a determination. And so in fulfilling the public hearing requirement, we should talk about what this means. What we're proposing to do is capture tax increments generated by this site. Tax increments are the new city, county, and a little bit of school property tax that are created as a result of additional development that has a value above and beyond what the market value is today. And so we're proposing to capture that new property tax and redirect it for the purpose of assisting with costs associated with demolishing and establishing new commercial facility at that location. We can make that capture for a period of up to 26 years. I don't think we anticipate that will be the term for the proposed project by any stretch. And so just making you aware of what's allowed under statute. The important parts of the tax increment plan include, the area that we're including, which you're aware of, as well as a budget. The budget in the tax increment plan calls out a number of costs that would be eligible, totaling $800,000. Again, as we have in the past, we create these budgets to provide the council with some flexibility for work that might be done and additional development that could occur between when we start this process and when we finish it. The budget is not an obligation to the district or to spend tax increments. It's simply mandated by statute that we establish a budget and live within that budget once we've created the district. So we, again, tried to provide you with some additional flexibility by creating a budget that perhaps is a little bit larger than what we anticipate. But as we found in the past, situations change, projects can be modified or adjusted, and we want to be able to accommodate those modifications and not have to revisit this process necessarily. So more than happy to answer questions from the council or public with regard to the proposed tax increment financing district number 1-22. As we mentioned, there's no action intended for this evening. Ultimately, what we would envision is a resolution would come to you that would adopt the tax increment plan. And secondly, there would be action with regard to a development agreement between the city and the developer that lays out specific terms and conditions for the provision of assistance. That hasn't been drafted at this time. Terms haven't been discussed in any sort of finality, so I'm not able to answer questions with regard to those at this point. Only take direction, I guess. So, thank you.
Questions for Shannon? Jeff?
I have one. I'm not sure if it's for Shannon or maybe Paula can answer this. This district 1-22 encompasses some land that goes to it looks like the right of way on the opposite side of the road. Is there a reason for that?
Yes. I'll take that
Perfect.
question. We always include all of the adjoining right-of-way in case there are any improvements, utility or otherwise, that need to be constructed within that right-of-way. Our map includes all of the right-of-way because we state within the plan that we're including all right-of-way. Public utilities are a pretty typical item that we're paying for using tax increments. Those public utilities are always within public right-of-way, and so we include it all immediately adjoining the property.
But there's no plans to actually extend utilities across 169 of
No.
4 lanes?
No.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any anyway.
Good.
I would assume services are all located on the same side as where the structure will be. But in the event they're not, we have the ability to assist in the payment of those costs, I guess.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Shannon, I have a question. So I'm looking at these numbers on our page 14, where it's a total of 800,861.
Yeah.
So the first item, land acquisition and demo,
Yes.
what, the acquisition can be put,
It could be an eligible expense. Again, we're not anticipating reimbursing the developer for that expense, but it is an eligible expense under TIF law. If, let's say for example, this developer simply went away and we still have a TIF district that we can create and retain, we may have a project that's different than what's being suggested at this time. We may want to fund acquisition. We have the ability by resolution to change the amounts by line item. And so I fill stuff in for the purpose of just getting us started. If we need to adjust on the fly, you don't have to go through this process again. You can, simply by resolution, reallocate those line items. So
when you do meet with a potential person doing the development, then when you come back to us, you'll have hard numbers
yes,
on all of these items. instead of
absolutely,
soft numbers.
absolutely. And again, the discussion to date, preliminarily as it is, has been on utility disconnections, reconnections, and some demolition costs, period. So
Okay.
I wouldn't envision anything different than that at this point.
Okay. All right. Anyone else have any questions?
It's just early for,
Was
it's early for questions for me.
Yeah, okay. Do you want to ask him in about an hour or so?
Well, when he knows more.
When we have a development agreement. for
Right.
those kinds of things. Yep, I understand.
If there are none others.
I have,
Oh,
Mr.
sorry,
Mayor.
Susan.
So now I'm a little bit confused. So we're setting this estimate of 800,000, but we're saying that some of these costs are probably not going to be, if we anticipate the project to go forward in the way that it's been mapped out at this point, we would not anticipate using TIF dollars for some of these things that are budgeted.
Correct.
So,
Very few of the things that are budgeted.
right. So then when do we reassess that amount of 800,000?
We don't, we simply adopt a budget and we operate within that budget.
Okay.
And
And then
so
we
if
just-
our increment collection is much less or our expenditures are much less, that's okay. We just can't exceed it, otherwise we have to go through this process again.
So we can close this sooner, and we've done that before.
And we expect to do that this
Right.
time.
So we're
Yes.
not looking at 800,000. We're looking
No.
at much smaller.
That's correct.
Okay.
But for example, and this is where you have some flexibility, if within, say, 5 years, we have a 5-year window to incur obligations within a TIF district, 5 years from certification, that we can look at it and say, we have some additional expenses in this area that we want to incur. We have a 5-year period to do that. If, for example, other blighted properties in very close proximity were to become available and the council saw it as a priority to purchase and demolish those, we would have some flexibility under this existing plan to perhaps do that. So that's why we create the flexibility.
Got it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Shannon.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Big brush right now.
Next up, we have, if the applicant is here and would like to make any statements. Don't see anyone. Next, we would have anyone that, from the public that would like to speak, either for or against this possible TIF district. Edie, if you would, name and address.
Yes, Edie Thorstensen.
Why don't you wait till you get to the microphone? Have a seat, sorry.
809 South 7th Street. My name is Edith Thorstensen. Yeah, my question is about the costs and benefits to our community. I'm under the impression that the tax that would otherwise go to, say, the school district, to St. Peter for the fire department and the police department, to the county, that those are somewhat diminished during this period of tax increment financing. Can anybody fill me in on that? For example, what has happened with the latest case? I don't know if mom and pops, if the demolition of the old Strand Millinery shop was on the city's dollar, or how that worked.
How TIF works, the school, they don't get the tax, but they do get a credit. Am I correct on that, Shannon? The school gets a credit. The only one that really, truly loses out on this is the county.
Okay.
The county does not get any reimbursement for it, they're just being gracious. So the school district will get credit, we'll get the tax, but it'll take a while to accumulate, and pay back the TIF part. But the difference is that with TIF, if we don't do this, with other, as in other TIF districts, then people don't, this is an incentive for developers to do it. And if we don't provide this incentive, then a lot of times the things, we probably wouldn't have a Shopko, we probably wouldn't have a Quick Trip, because we're all TIF districts that created. So yeah, there's pluses and minuses for it, but that's how the TIF, in my knowledge of it, works.
Okay,
John?
and it sounds as though the city will be diligent in its management of how this all comes together, and
Oh.
sounds
Yeah.
like an improvement. But I'm wondering about the next section to the south, which on the east side of Minnesota Avenue, no, the west side, sorry. That includes, say, the Kentucky Fried Chicken building that's still standing there, and some of that. Is there any chance that this one thing will lead to another, that this will suddenly become, the other end of town, that's in some ways changing the dynamic in the town, bringing more business out of the central business district and into the peripheral?
Once again, I'll answer unless somebody else, we have no way of knowing, at this point. The KFC, the old KFC on the south end that's been for sale now, well, somebody bought it, but now it's back up for sale again. What anyone would do with that property, I have no idea. But, that's been commercial property for years and years and
Yeah.
years. Other than that, we almost need a crystal ball for some of this stuff, I think.
Okay.
But we deal with them, we're very diligent on them, Paula is, and I don't know, John, did you have any other comments? You said you wanted something before.
Well, there was a statement made, an understanding that during the time of the life of the TIF district, that the entities, the city, the county, the school district, receive diminished taxes from what they're currently receiving. And my understanding is that whatever they received in 2016, they receive in 2017 and 2018, and every year going forward until the expiration of the TIF district, at which point their tax revenues would increase. But it would not decrease at all between now and then. The increased taxes that the developer is paying would go to pay off the bonds to do all the improvements. But they, there's no diminishment in the amount of taxes that the entities receive during the life of the TIF district.
It's just how it's kind of allocated.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
If I might, and that's an important point. There's no diminishing of the amount of tax that's going to those entities, to school, city, or county. It's just that with the redevelopment there, the increase is what's being redirected in the meantime. So, so for the entirety of the TIF district, those entities are locked into getting the, the 2016 rate of taxes. They're not seeing the benefit, but they're still getting the same baseline that they always did in the past.
Okay.
And so it's only the incremental increase that is provided by redevelopment that is put towards other costs. And I've spoken to one or two people recently who were not quite familiar with that part and thought that all taxes on that property were being redirected, and that's not the case.
It's just the, if you said, just the
The
increase.
incremental
Yeah, I
increase.
wasn't clear on that, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Edie.
Thanks.
Anyone else that would like to speak in favor or against, or any questions? If not, we will close this public hearing at 7:18 PM. Next up, we have the consent agenda. The consent agenda begins in detail on page 29 and concludes with the resolution on page 51, and includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $7,500. To Nielsen Concrete for alley improvements, for South 7th Street improvements, and for Wabasha Locust Street improvements in the amounts of $3,430.82, $11,985.14, and $2,605.10. The following board appointments: for Park and Recreation Advisory Board, Brian Fremo for 2015 to 2017. The following applications for licenses: temporary on-sale liquor to Church of St. Peter, 1801 Broadway for September 24th, 2017, to Nicollet County Ag Society for 400 West Union for September 16th through the 17th, 2017. Temporary soft drink for Church of St. Peter for 1801 Broadway on September 24th. Temporary gambling for Church of St. Peter for 1801 Broadway, 9/24/17. St. Peter Lions Club, temporary gambling for 800 College Avenue for October 31, 2017. And a temporary on-sale beer license to Knights of Columbus for 1801 Broadway for 10/27/17. The following employee appointments: Michael Belcher for part-time meter reader, Cody Paul for high school work study, and Elizabeth Gerlach for part-time bus aide, plus the regular schedule of disbursements for August 10th, 2017 through August 23rd, 2017. Are there any changes or corrections to the consent agenda?
Can I just clarify that on the purchases for Nielsen's?
Yes.
There's 3 of them there that are supplemental basically to the original purchase orders.
Right.
And the first one is all city costs, whereas the number 2 and number 3, those will be accessible projects. And
Okay.
we do already have consensus with those property owners and waivers signed for them.
And one thing I neglected to say before, the PowerPoint on some of these things, that's why you're not seeing it on the screen, is not available tonight. It's not working. We have other things. We have the cameras are working, but the PowerPoint isn't working, right? It won't be on TV at home. It won't be on TV at home. Let me put it that way. Better yet. Anyway, anything else on the consent agenda? Questions or comments?
I was curious on the 3 with the Nielsen Concrete, how we could have so many corrections. Normally, we see no corrections or minor corrections. These are 30% of the total is being added.
as Pete could help us out here, but as I understand that there are additional repairs that were able to be done during this construction with the
Errors of omission or commission or
No,
submission or
the actual
transmission?
hope was that during the course of tearing a lot of those areas out, I think South 7th Street was our biggest challenge. As we went through there and tore some of that curb out, a lot of it crumbled and needed to be replaced. And so where we tried to save the homeowners some money by not replacing every piece of curb that goes through there on a rebuild like that, in some of these cases, we weren't lucky enough to have that happen. And so it got removed. We wanted to have a nice street when we were done with good drainage, and that was the only way to get there.
Thank you.
But the only one, like Paula said, the only one really that's extra is the first one. The other one are accessible requests or whatever that we've
Right.
done. Okay. All right. Steve?
Back on that same question that Mr. John had mentioned. So were some of these initiated, were most of them initiated by the city, by the contractor, or by the homeowners?
They were
Or a combination of all
Yep.
three?
They were initiated mostly by the city. So if you look at the alley portion of the work there, we go out and pick some alleys where we plan to do some work, usually a year in advance. And so a lot of those areas are going to be worked on next year. The 7th Street was our target for our maintenance plan. And so we did everything from College Avenue, going to the south, all the way to South Elementary to coincide with the school work and the projects that were going on at the school system. And so a lot of those were selected in advance by working with different groups and agencies to try to make that all come together.
So, one final question, Mr. Mayor and Pete. Do you, this may sound like a crazy question, do you ever find homeowners that will contact the city and ask that their sidewalks be fixed up, knowing that they're going to be assessed for the fee?
Very, very few do. What we try to do is be proactive. We try to walk certain areas during the course of the year and inform customers if you're doing any work. You know, we're probably going to be in this area next year doing maintenance, and if we see something, we'll be asking you to sign on. Most of the time, our streets foreman and our construction stormwater foreman are out there right now working on next year's project. So people have time to evaluate how they feel about it, and most of the time when they realize that the city's offering them a finance package at a very low interest rate, it seems very feasible just to have the city coordinate that so everything flows for them.
I can only speak for myself, but I would encourage people to take care of their sidewalks, because there's many people that use them, and it's cheaper than getting a lawsuit for not maintaining your sidewalk.
Very true.
So, that's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, the consent agenda appears on pages 51 and 52. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Tony,
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
Aye.
Councilmember Brands,
Aye.
Councilmember Paris,
Aye.
Councilmember Brand,
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin,
Aye.
Mayor Zima.
Aye. Consent agenda is approved. Before we go to unfinished business, we will address visitors in the audience. Is there anyone tonight that would like to speak on any agenda item? Seeing no one, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the council on any matter whatsoever? Seeing no one, we will move to unfinished business. Unfinished business, we have Ameresco Guaranteed Energy Savings Project, and Paula, I guess this is you.
Let me give you a little introduction here. We do have Ameresco here, Kent Wolf and his team. We can additionally get some information from Pete if there's any questions. We just want to talk about the project that we've been in here for almost 2 years. We've been working with Ameresco to find a cost-saving project here. We've come up with that here with our lighting and a couple other things. We've done our negotiations and talked with approving and agreeing on scope and rates. And Kent has a presentation here I can queue up here, and after all of our workshops that we've had with you, hopefully this has answered all of your questions up to this point. So grab it.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Mayor Zeman, council members, thank you for inviting us back. My name again is Kent Wolf. I'm an account executive with Ameresco, and I'm going to share with you a project that we've been working with the city on for the past 2 years. And I'll get into the details of it in just a little bit and the benefits, but before I do that, I want to introduce two people that are also with me tonight. Ameresco Regional Director John Neville and Ameresco Project Development Engineer Corey Freeman. And they're here to help answer any questions that might come up this evening. So the proposal we have in front and we're going to be asking you to consider this evening is a self-funding project that will save energy and operational and maintenance costs over a 20-year period. Under the state statute 471-345, the energy savings and the O&M, as I mentioned, will pay for the project without additional taxes. This is a self-funding project, meaning that the energy savings is going to cover all of the costs of the project, including the engineering, the development, and the construction, equipment being installed. And in the end, you will get the benefit of high-efficiency equipment, new equipment, some capital improvements that were being considered, and all of this being paid for from the energy savings. So we were tasked with a number of things. That's okay, Paul. To look at, and we went through the city and looked at many different things over this period of time, and we came up with a select scope that we agreed with the city staff, and we call them energy conservation measures, and I'd like to go through each one of them now. This is the same information that was presented last week at the working session with a couple minor changes. So if you don't have a copy with your council packet, I've got hard copies here as well. Go ahead, please. So the first one, ECM 1, Energy Conservation Measure 1, is facility upgrade, lighting upgrade. We're going to be in the buildings and all the facilities. We're going to upgrade all of the fluorescent and incandescent lighting to LED. Now there are exceptions to that. We identified areas such as closets and things like that that do not have burn hours that we won't be replacing, but we're going to be upgrading all of the interior lighting to LED fixtures. We'll be retrofitting some of them and replacing some fixtures. ECM 2, which is energy conservation for street lighting, is we're going to be replacing roughly 800 fixtures, the high pressure sodium fixtures that you have on your streets with LED fixtures. Some areas are going to get 3,000 degree Kelvin, some will get 4,000 depending on the classification of the street, but we're going to upgrade your streets to LED street lighting, just as what was completed 3-4 years ago with our own staff as the street upgraded work is completed, some improvements. The third ECM that we're installing is ultraviolet disinfection equipment out at the wastewater treatment plant. This is currently similar to the equipment you have in place that you're using to treat your water, your effluent, before discharge. The equipment you have is at the end of its life. This is going to replace that with new high efficiency equipment, but it'll work very similar to what you have in place. Besides replacing this UV disinfection system, we're going to be replacing some transformers and some switchgear, and then make sure that the controls are configured so the operators can control the equipment in the most efficient way possible. We will be setting it up and programming it for optimum efficiency as we commission and start up the equipment. The next ECM is building envelope. This is a ECM that often is overlooked, but yet is very important to communities. We've got cold air in the winter, we've got warm, humid air in the summer. We want to keep those things out of the building. In the wintertime, obviously keep the warm air in, and in the summer keep the hot air or the cold air in at that point. So we're going to be sealing gaps, cracks, holes. We're going to be installing a two-part foam system where the roof and the wall joints have openings, and we're going to seal these buildings to the best of that's possible. Next one. The fifth and final is building automation and controls. We're going to be in this building replacing some controls, but we're going to be programming and making sure that the automation is working to the optimum ability possible. We'll be shutting down the heating system in the winter when after occupancy the building is emptied and the occupancy is closed, and pre-warming it before people come in the morning. Same with the air conditioning and the lighting. It'll be tied into this control system, which will save the city energy and the benefits that go along with that. So this is the project as we're proposing. It's a $2,650,000 project. It's going to give you improvements, as I mentioned, facility lighting, street lighting, the UV upgrades, building envelope and controls. It's going to save energy, it's going to save operational and maintenance costs for the city as well. We will be applying for all of your rebates, working with both the municipal utility as well as SIMPA, and ensuring that the maximum number of rebates dollars come back to the city from the work that's done through the efficiency upgrades. If you have any questions at any time, please jump in. This is one of the slides that I added from last week. This is a simple cash flow. Just so you see, I'm sorry, to me, I see it all the time.
What's that number there mean? That one, that's the only one we need to worry about.
So at the end of 20 years, you're going to have excess cash flow of roughly $138,000 to the positive, and that'll come back to the city's bottom line over time.
And if I could just make a few more statements here. On this cash flow, again, this is not that we're going to have $138,000 in our pockets. This is savings of energy that we have that we won't be paying utility costs. That number can change. As you can see, there is a M&V measurement and verification fee. If the city chooses to do those in years 3+, those would be costs incurred by us. If we choose not to do it, that number would increase that savings number at the very end of the 20-year program. We are going to be working with Bank of America. Part of the resolution is that you direct staff to work with them to do a lease purchase bond to fund this. And in this cash flow statement, it indicates the debt service payments and how that is affected annually and cumulatively.
So under this program, Ameresco will be guaranteeing cost savings on an annual basis. We guarantee that the annual savings will exceed your payment to the lending institution over the 20 years, averaging over the 20 years, so you have a positive cash flow at the end. If there's a shortfall, we do one of two things. We either cut you a check for the difference, or we come and install additional equipment that's going to save additional savings, cost savings benefit to the city to ensure that that guarantee is in place.
May I interrupt very quickly?
Certainly.
When you talk about that guarantee that's averaged over the 20 years, how do you determine, so if there is a shortfall and we're not seeing the energy savings that we anticipated, and we're at year 15, how do we wait until year 20, or would you be coming in along the way installing, would you be projecting outward?
Very good question. Our guarantee is on an annual basis. We come in and complete what we call annual measurement and verification. We will come in and, based on the plan that we have in the proposal, outlined in the proposal, that Ameresco will come on an annual basis and take spot measurements of equipment at the equipment versus at the meter to ensure that the savings difference between the baseline, which is measured before, and the actual equipment's use when run through a spreadsheet and calculated, the sum total of savings is exactly, or if more than what we're guaranteeing.
If I can clarify that, correct me if I'm wrong, Kent, but the city would have to do this annually in order to have that verification done in year 15. If you skip years 3 through 15, you're not going to get it. you have to continue with that.
That's right. What we've got outlined is the first 2 years of measurement and verification are included in the contract. We've laid out a cost in years 3 through 20. It's escalated at 3%. As long as you continue having us come back and completing the annual measurement and verification, the guarantee stays in place. If you choose at some point, which most communities generally at 3 or 4 years, discontinue that because they're seeing the benefit the first 2 years and seeing that the savings are being generated as the guarantee, they choose to, rather than to spend that dollar amount, they discontinue the measurement and verification, which stops the guarantee.
Go ahead.
And I'm interrupting further. So then those, that 138,000 projected savings, that's including the roughly 5,000 to 8,000 per year of verification fees?
Right
Or-
now, the 138,000 represents the cost as you see it. If you discontinue the measurement and verification at any point, you can have an additional 123,000 that will come back to the city.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? Steve?
So the first 2 years, you'll do some kind of analysis. Well, let's say that the city, 10 years from now, wants to develop another housing complex. So our rates go up, consumption goes up. How do you verify that from your baseline, and then you've added on additional services?
Those additional services are identified, first of all, we have an identified scope of work in our agreement. So if you add, we'll say street lights, those will be metered more than likely separately and independently of what we've done. So we know the scope of work, the number of lights, we'll be able to determine based on that scope what the savings is for that. If you add additional equipment, those costs will be outside the scope of this agreement.
So then how does the city keep you informed of added services, or if Mr. Moulton decides to do something, does he inform you somehow? Or, I mean, so there's this line of communication that exists for the next 20 years?
It's a very good question. As long as Ameresco continues to do the measurement and verification on an annual basis, we will be in touch with Pete and work with him for any changes in the equipment, any changes in the use or hours of operation of the equipment that we installed, to adjust the baseline accordingly. But this is a partnership for the next 20 years. Ameresco is not done with this project until the end of the 20 years or the measurement and verification. So we're going to be in continual contact with the city throughout those years. And that's one more point I want to add is this first year after construction, the first year of the guarantee, Ameresco will be here quite often, adjusting, making sure the equipment we installed is generating the savings. We don't want to get to the end of the first year and say, whoops, we didn't make the savings and now what do we do? We're going to be looking at it and observing it and making sure that the optimal amount of savings is being generated throughout that first year. Once that first year is complete, we're confident that the equipment as installed, as commissioned, will generate the savings that we guarantee.
Okay, thank you.
Roger?
Can you please explain why years 7 through 16 go negative in column J?
Okay, what we have here is the net savings in column I is the savings on an annual basis. So you're going to have savings the first year, which is going to be in excess, and that column J is the cumulative savings over the term of the 20 years. So as Todd indicated last week, there will be some years that it may go negative, but the cumulative over the 20 years will be a positive cash flow.
And that's based off of the 2.6% savings?
The 2.6 escalation percentage used on the energy, yes.
All right.
So really what we're doing here is we're swapping the energy savings that we're going to have to do a debt service payment. Again, over the life of the project, we should have something close to a net zero, hopefully something positive, and that we'll have a new system in place with the LED fixtures the buildings with the improvements.
Right, but in 7 through 16, we look like we might have to figure out how our budget works.
Correct. And we're looking at the annual differences in this as to what it could impact your funds. The funds that are going to be affected by this is your electric and your wastewater funds. And this should not have an effect on our general fund or our levies or any property taxes by the residents. The annual amount should be manageable within our budgets, and so that we can overcome those negative years and get the benefit of the positive years as well. Having the rebates fund some of those negative years up in the beginning of it will be beneficial.
Right. Instead of spending it, save it for those years.
Right. We would have the option as well to try to match our savings with our debt service payment. That takes a little longer and would incur a little more interest, and so we figured this was a manageable way and to save some interest cost along the way.
Steve?
So Paula, if I were to read between the lines there, I think to try to help Roger, and maybe help myself, is it because you're anticipating that the cost per kilowatt's going to go up at a certain rate, so then your savings will be escalated? Or the savings will be less because or will be more? I mean, when you look back at.
The graph as it displays has an automatic escalator in there, and the agreement has that automatic escalator in there. And so the 2.6 on the energy and 3% on the operations and materials. What that percentage is the maintenance. So you're not going to have to buy certain fixtures for a number of years and things of that nature that are going to be avoided. And so in the contract that is before you for the resolution, has those escalators built right into that contract agreement. It's independent as to whether in actuality your rates are going to change that way, if your index is going to change in the same manner, but this is the value that we have come to agreements with Ameresco.
Anyone else? Kent, a little background, over the last 2-3 years, how long has it been? How many times have you or your staff come to talk to us, roughly?
How many books we got?
Yeah, I would say maybe 10.
Yeah, I just want the viewing public to know that we just aren't deciding this tonight. We've spent a lot of time, and you guys have been here many times to do this.
This is a lot of engineering horsepower has been worked with this. We've presented this information in different formats. Larger project, but we've scaled it down and come to an agreement with staff on this project. Yes.
So if we didn't make any money, let's just plan that it's going to be a wash. Why would we do this?
A couple of reasons. Number one is you are not only doing an energy project, but you're doing some capital improvements that would have to be funded from a different budget. You've also got some green, associated green, I'll use the quote marks, but green benefits that I'll explain in just a moment, that the gas equivalents, the natural gas equivalent to carbon dioxide and the carbon footprint will actually be reduced. And I've got a slide on that coming up. Can you go back just one slide quickly? So I just wanted to make a point here. The disc on your left is your current utility spend as of 2015, because that was the information we had and basis on, was $850,000 roughly was your spend. We're seeing about $100,000 in utility savings, which would bring your utility spend down to $750,000, but that $100,000 or $99,000 is what's used to fund this project each year over the 20 years. So your total carbon footprint is reduced by 5,000 metric tons. And here's just this is for the natural gas, the therms consumed, the savings, the greenhouse gas emissions equivalent is roughly 7.1 cars per year. This is just the natural gas savings. And the CO2 emissions from the equivalent of 3,767 gallons of gasoline. There's some variables, other comparisons there, but let's go to the next slide, which is really where your savings is on the electric side. So the kWh savings equivalent is 210 passenger vehicles driven for 1 year, or 2.3 million miles driven. The CO2 emissions equivalent is 112,000 gallons of gasoline consumed, or the equivalent, if you go to the bottom right, the equivalent 105 homes energy use for 1 year. So it's a significant benefit, both in cost savings, infrastructure improvement, but the greenhouse gas and CO2 emissions that really do affect the environment and reducing your carbon footprint.
So the numbers you gave us here, these are all annual figures.
That's correct.
Anyone else have anything? Jeff?
I have a couple of questions, maybe backing up to ECM 1. We're talking about the fixtures and retrofits and things like that. Are the exit signs that are pretty much every door in places like a community center also included in that?
Yes.
Okay. And ECM 2, the LED streetlights, the brightness in my neighborhood will not change when we switch to LEDs, correct?
We will meet the MnDOT requirements for roadway conditions.
Okay.
So I don't know exactly where you live, of course, but we're saying that we will meet the requirements of standards or specifications set and used by MnDOT for roadways based on the classification.
Okay. Pete, can you maybe extrapolate? Is my neighborhood going to get darker?
You live on Collector Street,
And the
and
lights.
so. Sorry. Jeff, where you live, you're on a Collector Street, and so the width of that street, you're gonna have the 4,000 Kelvin on your street.
Okay.
We'll work with Ameresco staff here in the next few weeks to determine where those go and how many of those we need and how we're gonna implement those.
Okay. For the ECM 3, the wastewater treatment plants, we're actually talking about taking our disinfector offline. How many months are we talking?
Well, the goal would be is to work with the engineering staff, get everything designed and ordered, and then when the UV goes out of system during the fall period to April is when we make those repairs. I don't know if Kent covered that in the workshop, but there's some modifications that need to be made to the receiving stream, the area where we have to install the UV. And so we'll make those modifications and get that online before, hopefully before our permit starts requirement of disinfection in April.
So we don't have to disinfect from fall to April?
Correct.
That's, okay, good.
October 31st to April 1, we do not have to disinfect.
Okay, I was just a little unclear on that. Okay. It's really hard to argue against, taking 1 million pounds of coal offline every year by doing this stuff, but I guess personally I'm a little conflicted about the funding mechanism. I mean, I know you guys vetted it, right? So you did your own due diligence and that sort of thing, but I think it quite is possible that Bank of America has a more tarnished reputation than Wells Fargo by doing very limited amounts of research online. And so I'm conflicted because this is a really amazing project for our community and our state, but by the same time, I wouldn't personally do business with this company due to all the very, very underhanded things they've done to both the folks that they work with and the folks that work at that company, including, and not limited to, part of the problem was the 2008 bubble occurred and a lot of people lost a lot of retirement account money in the stock market because of the bubble bursting, and they played a major role in that. And so I feel a little conflicted. I appreciate the equivalencies and talking about, 1 million pounds of coal being taken offline and different things like that, but personally for me it's a little bit of a struggle.
And just to cover that a little bit, we did evaluate some different options as far what banking we could use. This one has come in under the best financial scenario. And so that's the one that I guess we're proposing that you approve us to investigate yet further.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Roger.
This is the hard question. Over the 20 years, we're talking 21.9 million pounds of coal. or do business with Bank of America to get the best rate, or you pay more, and then therefore you have to hit your taxpayers harder because the rate is higher. So it's like, which one do you want to pick?
Right.
Steve?
In our conversations in the past, there were two things that I think that we had talked about initially and had talked to you about, and that was the concern that some citizens have relative to LED lights. And I think that those have been addressed, that they are not the type that will interfere with whatever they're supposed to interfere with. And the other thing is light pollution. I believe that that was also addressed in this conversation, to try to minimize light pollution or to reduce it. And by replacing the lamp fixtures to the new style, that light pollution would also be reduced by our community. So, yeah.
Again, a great question. The equipment we're going to be installing, the fixtures are dark sky compliant, meaning they will have less light illuminating upward. It'll be directed to the ground. So I think that addresses that. And then by going to the 3,000 and the 4,000 degree Kelvin, we're below the lighting color rendition that was causing problems. And that's why the city, Pete, and specifically has suggested that residential versus collectors have these different color renditions. Now, we've put in samples on Broadway, both the 3,000 and the 4,000. They're dark sky compliant. You can drive up there and look at them tonight. I would be hard pressed for you to really notice a significant difference. But that's why Pete has asked for us to, and John has actually asked for us to put in 3,000 where possible.
We've also worked with two homeowners up there that have had lighting issues related to that general area. It's high traffic, a lot of kids walking to the middle school area right now. Since those lights have been put in there, they've been very complimentary that it does not cause them any problems. And so they wanted to shoot it by them first to see how things would go, and they're very complimentary.
Well, I know, Pete, if you're involved in a project, I feel the utmost confidence in what's being done.
Thank you.
So thank you both.
Are you up for review?
Oh, he started it, the rest of us, so remember that.
Anyone else? Kent, were you finished? Are you done?
I am.
Okay.
I just would like to thank you for working with Ameresco to develop this project. We're looking forward to you as the council, considering and approving this project. Once you consider approving this project and move forward, we will immediately go into the implementation phase and begin the final work that's needed, getting materials ordered and scheduling, working with Pete and his staff so we're not interfering with the business of the city, and making sure that this implementation goes as smoothly as possible.
Well, I do anyway, appreciate your persistence over the years and clarifying things, and also thanks to John and Corey too for the times. I know Corey's been here quite a bit too. So, with that, any more questions for Kent at this point? Thank you.
Thank you.
If not, the resolution approving the execution of a guaranteed energy savings agreement with Ameresco appears on page 61. Is there a motion for approval?
Move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Terrace.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Corn.
Aye.
Resolution passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have new business, and the first up is the Furnishing Padmount Switchgear Award, bid award. Pete, I think this is you again, Pete.
Okay. Make sure I'm on the right page here.
Our page 62, if you're in the
It's
same
page
deal.
62, there we go. City staff worked with our city engineer, electrical engineer DGR, to put together a written specification looking for 2 pad mount switchgears. We had a failure out on the Lake Emily circuit. Switchgear basically takes feeds from 2 different directions and supplies constant electricity to homes. These are very expensive units, and they are very worth their while. They make our system reliable and dependable, and we count on them heavily to provide electricity to our customers. Our practice has been that our thought was we'd always have one on inventory, and if we didn't carry one on inventory, we'd find a company that would have similar products for us that we could pick up in short notice. After we had the failure out there last spring, we found out that we didn't have the availability that we needed, and it caused us a little bit of concern, and our crew worked a lot of overtime to try to make this switch work for us and get some things back in there. It is operating right now, but it is in need of replacement, and so with that specification we advertised, we received just one bid for the type of equipment that we were looking for. Although there are a couple of distributors that can supply this product, only one came forward with the timeline for delivery and for the product we were asking for. On page 65, there's a resolution that's asking you to authorize the sole vendor that did bid this project. We did have DGR check with some other companies just to make sure that this price seemed solid, and it is a very good price for us, and so we're here recommending tonight that this move forward.
You read my mind with that.
Questions for Pete? Steve?
He answered.
For those of us that are visual learners like myself, what does a switchgear look like?
It's a green box that has two doors on each end, and really what you'll have is feeds that come in, underground cables that come in under the base of that unit with fiberglass and plastic on the inside to insulate the elbows and the connections so that it can take one unit and feed it back out into a parallel circuit.
Because you've got on this letter there, there's 20 of those in the city?
Yeah, we roughly have about 20 of them that are switchgear, Padmount switchgears. They look a lot like transformers, except for the transformers do a variety of different things as far as voltage reduction or increasing.
So is they would be very dangerous if someone were to open a box or something?
They would be very dangerous.
Okay. All right,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Don't open boxes.
Yeah,
Anything
don't
else?
Open that box.
Don't open any boxes.
If not, the resolution awarding the bid for the Padmount Switchgear 2017 project appears on page 65. Is there a motion for approval?
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any other questions? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Graham,
Aye.
Councilmember Paris,
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Garland,
Aye.
Mayor Zeman,
Aye.
Councilmember Tony,
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Next up, we have the
Thank you.
Sunrise Water Tower painting project proposal.
Yes,
Pete?
part of our regular budget this year was for maintenance of our Sunrise Drive water tower. As we had mentioned before, the lower part of the pedestal is peeling a little bit. What we're going to do with this project is do some spot repairs on the inside and do some exterior blasting with water pressure. Remove the loose scale. It's a little tough to see, but on the top right picture up there, you can kind of see the tan looking areas in the areas where it splits there, the crevice. And what we'd like to do is take the loose paint off and give it another coat of paint so we'll get another 10 to 12 years out of it. The goal would be is that the companies that we had advertised this on our website. We had a specification, a mini spec drawn up by our engineer Bolton and Mink, and we feel really good that Osseo Construction is the company that is doing our water tower work up here right now. They realized a cost savings by not having a huge mobilization cost, and you can see that in the reflection of the prices that were bid there. We feel really good about their price that they supplied, and we're asking that you authorize them to complete that work. That work would begin roughly about the time the other tower is completed. And so the main thing is here is we've got 2 elevated storage tanks. Right now Sunrise is online feeding the entire city. The Broadway tower is out of service, and so we've got to have the other tank on before Broadway can be taken out. And so we'll work together with the contractor to get that to happen.
Susie?
Is it typical for the paint to begin failing this quickly? It seems like on our other towers, they've lasted longer without need for paint, or am I wrong at that?
Nope, you're correct. It's probably a little premature for the paint on the exterior to fail. The inside portion of that, the bottom right picture, was basically a mill coating that was questioned at the time of construction, although a lot of the tests came out okay. A lot of that wear there can be attributed to tank turnover, water turnover inside your tank, and the humidity that it creates inside there. That's a wet condition 90% of the time during the summer. And so paint is subject to fail inside of that. That's about what your other tank looked like too at about 10 years inside. But the public doesn't see that portion, and we'd like to preserve what we have going on there. Since we're going in and doing some work, we'd like to make sure that we can touch that up.
Jeff?
I caught on something you'd said, and it wasn't in the memo, but you had said another 10 to 12 years. Are you talking about the life of the paint being another 10 to 12 years, or in 10 to 12 years we're replacing this whole structure?
We will be taking the existing coating off and putting on a new coating. So we're trying to get that bottom portion to match what the bowl will produce. It won't do us any good to do a 20-year repair on the lower half,
Right.
and then have the top half only go another 10, 12 years.
What's the
so-
life expectancy of a
About
water
20
tower?
years.
I don't know of the water tower, the metal and
Oh.
everything.
You've got to be thinking if it's maintained on a regular basis like us, 100 years.
Okay.
Yep, so your existing tank up here at Broadway, this will be the third painting for that. That was built in the early 80s, 83, I think. Somewhere in there, 84.
Very good.
Anyone else? Sorry. Steve?
Pete, my wife accuses me of being colorblind. So, but yes, Saturday went by and I noticed it was a green color.
Yep.
Is that, what would you call that, a base paint, or what do you call that?
That's a primer.
Okay, all right. So is the color is going to be white again
It'll
then?
be tank white, just like this. It's actually a real light blue. Both tanks will look the same, and so the color that you saw was the base primer. Then they'll do a lighter tint like you're seeing here, which is a beige. That tank has the same 3 coatings on it that you're looking at right now coming back from the Broadway tank.
And then will the city have its logo on the tank again?
We will. We'll
too?
have the same logo that's on the Sunrise
Okay.
tank.
All right, thank you.
Pete, was this budgeted? Was this
It
planned?
was
What did we budget, do you remember?
$50,000.
So if we wouldn't have had these guys in town, we'd be
We'd be asking for
again
more.
why we went over, but good. Glad to see we utilize that. Anyone else? If not, the resolution. Let me get to the right page here.
69.
Appears on page 69 for accepting the proposal for the Sunrise Water Tower refurbishing. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, you're fine.
Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Paris,
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Carlin.
Aye.
Mayor Zini.
Aye.
Councilmember Fleming.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Grant.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Next up, we have the 2016 equipment certificate purchase for a squad car. Chief Peters.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. On page 70, you'll see my memo. On page 72 is a resolution to authorize the purchase of a Dodge Durango or Dodge Charger squad car.
Any questions?
It's a car, what can I tell you?
Yeah.
It's not a switchgear.
How do they look?
You got me.
Steve? Yeah, go ahead.
Chief, special service vehicle, what does that mean?
That's what Dodge calls a police package. So it has a larger alternator, as an example, than a regular car would. It uses a different kind of hose clamps.
Why do you go with these Dodge Charger? I mean,
Primarily because of the price and because we can have them serviced locally.
okay. And one final question. Is there a way to encourage our local law enforcement community to keep themselves physically fit so that they can fit in these vehicles? I know it's kind of a loaded question, being that this council probably could maybe use some of that encouragement, but I'm just curious.
Are you
know.
talking about, no. We do. Lots of them do work out on their own. I won't go into kind of the weeds on this,
Sure.
but it becomes problematic if we try to set up a program to require it. And we looked at that some time ago, and it was really recommended to us by the League of Cities not to go down that path. And I can get into it deeper if you would like. It really has to do with what can you physically require somebody to do, and how can you set that up very objectively so that everyone meets those standards. And if they don't meet the standard, then it becomes a medical issue.
Yeah, I know, I'm just looking at anybody that would be in a situation where they'd be in a physical altercation, you know, it could
Sure.
be dangerous for themselves too.
Absolutely.
I'm just a curiosity, because some of these vehicles aren't very large, that's why I was wondering, you know, these Chargers, so. Considering, you know, the old Ford LTDs and those kind of vehicles, yeah. Well, thanks.
Anyone else?
Peterbilt, sir.
I suppose we could, yeah, that'd be all right.
We do
yeah.
have the funding here in
digress.
the 2016 budget. The actual purchase of the 2016 equipment certificate was anticipated to be used sooner than now, but due to an incident that we had with another charger that had paid by insurance, we are now able to use those funds to purchase the next new squad.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the chief? If not, the resolution approving the 2016 equipment certificate appears on page 72. Is there a motion for approval?
Move the resolution, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Any other questions or comments?
Comment.
Roger.
I appreciate you putting in information about a pickup truck, because that's been a question I've asked before, so I appreciate that.
Oh, sure. I think we always have to look at kind of different options and what's out there, but we have to, I think, be good stewards of resources.
Steve, I was just thinking about, you know, your question about the weight. You know, there, in the springtime especially, there's road restrictions for weight limits. So that
I
might-
never thought about that,
might
Mr.
cover
Mayor.
some of your concerns
Keep-
there.
Yeah, keeps the problem down there.
Any other questions or comments? Did we get a call the roll?
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Councilmember Garland.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Quinn.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Paris.
Aye.
Resolution passes. Next up, we have a Kids Corner
Thank you, sir.
renewal lease, excuse me.
I'll try to cover this one as best I can, but the lease is up for Kids Corner. And the difference in this lease agreement and what you've seen in the past is that they've added additional 2 rooms. One room was being at the similar rate of the rooms of likeness. And the second room would have somewhat of a less cost for the additional room due to the amenities that it's available to them. This lease is going to run from October 2017 and to December 2019. The second year of this lease does include an escalator. And we have a diagram of the spaces that they are occupying. And so we would like to pass a resolution that indicates that we can execute that lease agreement.
Questions? Comments? Jeff?
In the past, we've maybe discussed this more at a workshop, so excuse me, but I'm just kind of curious, how caught up are they on back payments?
This
Kids
is
Corner.
Kids Corner.
Oh, I'm
Kids
sorry. Yep,
Corner is-
never mind,
is
I'm sorry.
correct.
Yeah, that's correct. I got confused there.
Anybody else? If not, the resolution authorizing execution of a renewal lease for rooms at the community center with Kids Corner appears on page 84. Is there a motion for approval?
So move.
Second.
Any other questions or comments? Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Garland.
Aye.
Mayor Zeman.
Aye.
Councilmember Conlon.
Aye.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Graham.
Aye.
Councilmember Paris.
Aye.
Councilmember Brand.
Aye.
Resolution passes. That concludes concludes our new business. Next up, we have reports. By the time we meet again, in the park, Rock Band will have already have taken place in a couple of weeks or a week and a half from now, I guess. And the only other thing, I want to thank Paula for sitting in for Todd tonight. Thanks. And now I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, Todd left me a few things. He did want me to mention that there is a modification on the honeybees that is going to be coming, and it was originally advertised for discussion to happen tonight, but the publication has been amended, and so anybody who's interested in that should tune in here for September 11th. That information will come September 11th to your meeting. He also wanted me to report on our cultural literacy training. The city staff, along with Nicollet County and North Mankato, staff has been doing some cultural literacy training. We just completed our third of number 4 sessions, and our next meeting will be in North Mankato here, coming up in October, I believe. Also, if anybody wants to speak on the high school grand opening, have some comments?
Anyone? Jeff?
I'd be happy to go first. I know other people were there, but I was amazed, and I'm proud of our community for the dedication in terms of what it's going to take to pay for that over time. And I'm grateful because my children will have that benefit, and hopefully other children will enjoy the benefits of a new school and do awesome and great things throughout the course of that high school's existence.
Anyone else that was there? Comments? Susan?
I was there as well. I think it's a great asset to the community. It's a big building. My family started touring it, and we ran out of time and had to leave to do something else, but I trust that we're going to be back there many, many times over the years. There are some beautiful spaces for shared community events, and I look forward to using that space over the years.
Speaking of the partnerships too, just the Community Spirit Park, the cooperative that we have done with the school district and the city here to develop Community Spirit Park. And then also he wanted to let you know that, again, the Broadway and Jefferson Avenues are now open for traffic. So we have a few punch lists and things to complete those, but the roadways are open there.
Okay. Anyone else have anything they would like to share? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
All in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
Grab my clinic. There, Jerry, please.
I noticed a couple of meetings.
Sir?